Good evening and welcome to TNC Football. Look, Dutch 1970 team, total football. You know, every player could play every position. This week, I am hosting because Joey is actually at Melbourne Victory's game with Perth. He's going to be dialing in later in the program. You know, he's going to be dialing in live from the press conference. Hopefully, we can ask Popper a question via this medium. Let's see how it goes. But yeah, like I was saying, look, Dutch football, they play in all types of position. This is kind of like that. Different, where everyone's going to have a bit of a go at hosting. I am starting today. A-League Week 3. Exciting times. Teo, sum it up for me in one sentence.
VAR is back.
Very good, very good. Josh Parrish, FNR. Oh.
Okay. No, I'm only going to go with one sentence. I'll let Josh have his one.
I like it. You tried to bend the rules early, especially when, maybe video assistant review would look at that and say, look, you're offside already early on in the program. We're 59 seconds into the broadcast. But Josh Parrish of FNR, sum up A-League Week 3 for me in one sentence.
Cautious. Just do one word.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Economy. That's it.
Well, don't need much. Can I now elaborate?
You can, Teos. Let's go with it. Where do you want to start?
VAR is back. It only took us 3 weeks, but I think a lot of people are unhappy with refereeing. A lot of the big teams are aggrieved with what happened with refereeing decisions this week. We won't tread on the toes of the games involving the Melbourne teams because that's where some of our correspondents are going to be jumping in from. But it applied to a lot of games this weekend. And I feel as though we had a pretty refreshing first 2 weeks where we didn't have, I think, maybe the Melbourne City versus Brisbane Roar game, but we didn't have major enduring VAR controversies. But it just felt as though the refereeing was a regular point of discussion every game of the round this week. And it's one of those things that kind of digs up old memories of the last couple of seasons and the frustrations we've all felt. Maybe the way people are going to perceive this weekend will be different because games aren't necessarily being re-refereed by the broadcaster and overanalyzed in the post-mortem. Perhaps to the same extent that they might have been when Fox was the broadcaster, I'm not sure. But I'm sure we're going to get into these games and talking about refereeing decisions is going to be central to it. However, I come out of the weekend fairly relaxed and fairly comfortable about how the refereeing went. But that's also because I'm not a one-eyed supporter of any given team. And I can see and read the anger of many supporters about how they felt about the refereeing and the influence of VAR this weekend.
Josh, do you think there were any howlers this week when it came to refereeing decisions?
Yeah, I think there were probably a couple. One of which being the Wellington Western Sydney game where the Tomer Hamed goal was given, even though he clearly pushed his defender in the back. No goal for me, and that changes the entire complexion of that game. I mean, there's no way that Johnny Katrumbas scores that ludicrous breakaway goal with the keeper up for the corner if that Hamed strike doesn't count. And the other howlers we just saw in the Melbourne Victory Perth Glory game, VAR actually fixed those. So Kurt Ams continues to have an absolute nightmare. And, I was doing the Doherty Cup final broadcast today. Refereeing was a big talking point. But I thought Adam Bavka managed that incredibly, contentious game with 2 red cards in it and a penalty very, very well. Whereas over at Ames Park, in a much less contentious game, Kurt Ams managed to let it completely get away from him and was actually bailed out by the VAR on not one but 2 occasions.
All right. Well, I reckon we start with the Wellington Wanderers game, mainly because if you're watching this and not listening to it as a podcast, shout out to everyone who is listening to us, by the way, as a podcast. I think at one stage we were 5th in Australia for football podcasts in this country. I don't actually understand the ratings. I don't understand if that someone just photoshopped it and sent it to me, but it looks like people are tuning in. We thank you very much for that. Please write into us if you have any questions that you want answered. If you want to watch this live, we're going out on Twitter. I think we're going out on YouTube. I think we're going out on Twitch as well. I don't know really how to use Twitch, but it seems we're going there. Look, let's start with Wellington Wanderers. So the first thing, did the decision, do we all think that it shouldn't have been a goal, that he clearly pushed the player in the back?
Yes, 100%. And I think the Kiwis across the ditch were broadcasting this with their own commentators, Jason Pine and I think Jacob Spoonley. And interestingly, they were so focused on whether or not the ball had crossed the line Piney actually said we didn't discuss whether there was a push. And I'll be honest, it draws the eye. I had to watch that replay 3 or 4 times just to work out the canonical effect of bodies being pushed one into another like a human pool table in order to work out where the fouls were. And perhaps that was a bit overwhelming for VAR as well. It's a little bit like, to use, cricket is far more successful because it's had its video review systems for a lot longer, whether it's runouts or DRS. And you can refer a decision, and whether it's LBW or caught behind, you can get 2 bites of the cherry. And I just wonder, was there a communication breakdown here in that people only were looking at whether the ball crossed the line, and it didn't even cross their minds to think to look if there was a push?
I think you're exactly right. I think that's exactly what happened, because the first question that we kind of thought, has that gone over the line? And that was the original kind of claim. And then obviously it had gone across the line. And I think it was a classic case of, magician's illusion, making you look over here when the real story was over here. So I think that's exactly what happened. And that's why the goal stood, basically. I think it was an interesting one, because I thought Wellington were doing quite well up until that period. You look at the result and you think 2-0 for Wanderers. But the kind of question that I want to take out of it, 2-0 for Wanderers, they'll be happy with that. Did they do anything this week to convince you that they are, in fact, that there is some progress there, that Robinson is, because we were quite critical of him in previous rounds. Is there progress there?
I don't think so. I didn't see it. I didn't see progress, I should say. I did very much enjoy your magician jazz hands, by the way, Stoll, for people listening to the podcast. But look,
that's why you should watch live. You see these beautiful hands.
I am kind of astonished at how Carl Robinson has managed to make a midfield with Ugarkovic and Antonis in it so underwhelming. And we talked about Dimian Petrados and his very adventurous shots from range and, spamming crosses into the box as not being conducive to creating high percentage opportunities. But he was benched in this game and they still looked poor. They still look quite ponderous. And, I thought they were very unconvincing against a Phoenix team who were happy to sort of let them have the ball in less dangerous areas and keep their shape. I didn't see much to suggest that Wanderers will be a finals contender this season. Not if they keep playing like that. Yes, they got the result, but I thought they were quite lucky to get it. And this probably should have ended in a draw.
This is the 3rd game in a row where I'm at a loss as to how Wanderers didn't lose. They've got 5 points from 3 games. They're unbeaten, and they're on a run of looking like the second best team in every game that they play. Wellington created almost all of the chances up until the Hamed goal. I thought that Lewis is again continuing to influence games a lot more in midfield. Piscopo, I thought, was pretty impressive. Old had a good debut. And don't forget, we talk about VAR. Wellington had a really close offside call of their own where Laws, I keep accidentally calling him John Laws, Josh Laws, you know what I mean. He put the ball in the net and thought he'd scored his first A-League goal, only for it to be a razor-thin decision with, to be honest, a camera that wasn't completely perpendicular to the offside decision. So Wellington made all the running in this game, got hit against the run by a goal that should be disallowed, and then they lose 2-0 because the keeper went up at the end. Not to make this seem like anti-Wanderers, because I wasn't exactly full of praise for how they played against Newcastle last weekend either, but both goals they scored against Newcastle were from criminal defensive mistakes by the Jets, who shot themselves in the foot. So I'm yet to see it either with Wanderers this season. I guess the bonus for them is they've got 5 points in the bank. And looking at the fixture for next weekend, they have got MacArthur at home. So they're now going to come up against a defence that hasn't conceded from open play and has not been mistake-prone. In fact, has been the complete opposite. So now we get to see if their lucky run will continue or if MacArthur might actually start to show that these first 3 weeks of the season are going to look like an outlier come round 27.
Do you guys remember when you were growing up, and everyone has this in their life, there is a period of time where you realize your parents maybe don't know everything. Maybe they're quite, when you're growing up, you kind of think your parents know everything, you're infallible. And then there's a moment where it switches and you realize maybe they don't know too much. It might come very late in your life. It might come when you're trying to teach them something, on a computer or some kind of technology thing. The reason I bring this up, do the Wanderers players, are they having that feeling with Robinson? Because, they are very experienced, a lot of these players, Ugarkovic, Rodwell, Antonis, have played under many coaches, many clubs. To me, it's a really good team. In fact, on paper, it's the best midfield in the competition. I think there's a lot of quality there. But they must start to realize, the players, that this team, that Robinson doesn't seem to have the answers based on these first 3 games and based on last season.
No, I actually think it's the opposite, because I think the professional athlete mindset is that any bonus you get is, many athletes are superstitious. Many of them sort of self-perpetuate their own greatness and their own success, even if they're not great, because it's an inherent belief within them. I think the fact that they're sitting on 5 points when they could just as easily be sitting on 0 or 1 will be evidence to a lot of them that they're a blessed team and this is their season. So I think when we come to the psychology of, does the gaffer have the dressing room, look, maybe a few results and in 3 weeks' time will be saying he well and truly doesn't, and the signs were always there. But I think in terms of how it's perceived in the short term, I think a lot of the Wanderers players will be buzzing from the fact that they're in this position, when perhaps the objective viewpoint from the outside is that they shouldn't be.
Well, as we know from Tony Gustafsson, the best teams operate between internal pressure and external pressure, whatever that whiteboard thing meant. So I'm sure that there is a lot of external pressure on the Wanderers, but they're between the 2 circles right now, and I don't think the veneer of Carl Robinson's sort of, I guess, his partridgeism has quite occurred to them.
Yeah, and look, I want to. Oh, you go, Teo.
No, just quickly on Wellington. Do we have anything else to say about them out of this game, other than our expectations have been perpetually low for this team? They've got Newcastle away next weekend. I mean, is there much we can take out of this one other than they were unlucky, and that they probably are going to fluctuate in their form, because we don't have any high expectations of what they're going to do week in, week out?
No, I think that's fair. I wonder whether Ben Old will keep his place in the team. I don't think he did anything wrong particularly, but I'd like to see a little bit more of Luka Pirshov, however you pronounce his surname. But I did like what I saw from him at the Jets last season. I think he can add something in terms of creativity. I think they're a little bit too dependent on Reno Piscopo beating players off the dribble, or David Ball, dragging somebody out of their defensive shape to create chances. So, something else in that lineup, something a little bit more of creativity, I think, down the right-hand side would be a welcome addition, because they don't get a lot of overlaps from right fullback either.
Well, let us know if you are watching. Let us know your thoughts on anything that's happening in the alley. We've already had one question come in from Ivan Stragan. We will get to that when we talk the victory game, which we will get to once Joey Lynch joins us live from Amy Park. But yeah, just on the Wanderers, just wanted to ask one final question of you guys. Jack Rodwell, first, I believe, start for the club. Your thoughts on him and that kind of experiment? Do we think it's going well? Do we think he's meeting expectations, exceeding expectations?
I mean, he seems like a bit of a vestigial element to this team. I'm not really sure what his job is. He's put himself about. He's made some big tackles. It doesn't seem to be here for a holiday, in quotes. But does he make their midfield more cohesive? I'm not sure. My ideal Wanderers midfield would be Ugarkovic, the deepest midfielder, Antonis as sort of the 8, I suppose, and Nadjarine playing as a 10, where he was occasionally very, very eye-catching for Newcastle Jets in that role. I still am not convinced by Bernie Abini's role in the team. Is he a winger? Is he a striker? He flatters to deceive for mine. I'm not sure if he'll start next week.
Would love to see Nadjarine start more. I think that could be really interesting. But Teo, thoughts on Wanderers?
Rodwell's already outdone my expectations. If you told me, here's the appearance schedule of an English import, and you'd given me Daniel Sturridge's minutes and said, and then you'd given me Jack Rodwell's minutes and said which one is which, I 100% would have picked Rodwell as the guy who plays 7 minutes and then 2 DNPs in a row. So he's already massively outdone my expectations. Is the fact he's fit, he's here, he's present, and he's committed, which seems like a low bar. But I think that, this new era of A-leagues, particularly the men's, the competition is trying to rebuild its image as a destination for high-profile players after a couple of dry runs, pretty much with Keske Honda, the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
Just one more before we move on, Stoll. I think Carl Robinson has brought his best football in the A-League in that a few months spell when he was in charge of the Jets playing a 3-4-1-2. And if Rodwell, who played as a central defender when he was at Blackburn Rovers briefly, could bring the ball out from the back as maybe the right centre-back, I think that would be a great role for him because he's shown his defensive chops already, and he's probably a little bit more confident on the ball than some of their other defenders. I think they should be considering changing the shape, but they seem to have worked on a 4 in preseason, so that's maybe not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, it's a good shout. And look, the more the Wanderers play and the more I see Robinson's teams play, the more I'm kind of like stunned at that 10-game period where his Newcastle Jets were really, really good. And I start to think have I just misremembered that? Were they actually really good? Or was I just kind of high on the Jets were terrible that season and then suddenly there was kind of an uptick? So I don't know. It's up there with me for the Tando Valapi game for Brisbane Roar against Melbourne Victory as something that I'm not sure if I remember it correctly or it was actually really good.
Have we just had a collective sort of Mandela effect? Has he managed to persuade us that team? I remember that team playing great football. I'm not sure if it actually happened based on what he's done since.
Who knows? Moving on, they play MacArthur next, Wanderers, next weekend. Obviously, they've got the FA Cup against Arpia Leichhardt, which should be fun. But then, next week they're against MacArthur. They beat Mariners 1-0. Thanks to an awesome bit of skill from Danny De Silva. Danny De Silva to Ruan Tonic was the Messi to Jerome Boateng. He spun him and put him on the ground. It was beautiful. Set up Lucis De Vio, who was deflected in. 1-0 to MacArthur. Look, we'll talk about them off-field in a little bit, but Teo, thoughts about them on-field today?
On-field, MacArthur dominated this game, and no disrespect to the Mariners or their fans, but 1-0 was a really flattering scoreline to the Central Coast, and MacArthur will probably primarily take the clean sheet over everything else, but this could have been 3 or 4. They created most of the chances. Lockie Rose got in the way of a shot from one of his own teammates to block what seemed to be a goal-bound attempt. I mean, Noon wasn't overly prominent in this game. If this was De Silva's game, De Villa's always going to perform. And again, that back line, solid as a rock. I know that Curto had to make a couple of saves to deny steal and also a little half chance near the end. But for the most part, this was MacArthur in complete control. And I've got to say, the Mariners, we know that they were really pushed in their FFA Cup tie against Wollongong. They've had issues with suspensions now starting to stack up. Yaron Souza, unfortunately for him, Victorian from Pascoe Vale, who spent time in Turkey, makes his A-League men's debut, then gets injured and has to go off. And so he's replaced by the third choice keeper, Caruso, who had a gaff, Lawrence Caruso, but he also had an amazing save in there. So good for him, but unfortunate for Yaron Souza. And guys, the signs weren't great for Maresha, the Brazilian. I know he scored in the Cup, but if you're bringing in a Brazilian striker, you expect instinct in the 6-yard box. And in this game, he appeared to display that he actually has the opposite of a goal-scoring instinct because he turned a couple of really good half chances that you expect a foreign import of quality to put away and to make Australian defenders look like they're not up to speed with what's going on in the rest of the world. And instead, he trod on the ball. And then there was another one later where he just couldn't get to it in time. So, not impressed by the Mariners. Gee, that win in round 1 is starting to feel like a little bit of a long time ago. And I'm not 100% sure why, when you're coming up against the biggest, most physical defense in the league, that you would start Maresha when I thought that Damien Sakanis did a really good job as a target man last week. And if nothing else, he could draw the attention of Jovanovic or Uskok and at least, just bang bodies against them and cause some sort of physical trouble. Maresha's physical profile is meant to be quick and able to get around these guys, and he's just not, he's not A-League quick. So I think Mariners got issues, and I think MacArthur don't. And Adrian Mariappa seems like icing on the cake, and perhaps it's because they'll play him in a defensive midfield role because right now I wouldn't touch that back line. It's performing that well.
It's pretty interesting, MacArthur, because we saw their preseason. They got smashed by Sydney FC 5-0. And I know you shouldn't read too much into preseason, but there was also issues with Federici kind of retired, just before the season. Milligan left the club. Don't know exactly what happened there. He did show up on Sydney FC's website explaining what MacArthur was going to do. And then MacArthur won 1-0, which is one of the more funnier things of the season so far. But yeah, interesting MacArthur. They're actually top of the table, which I really would not have predicted at the start of the season. But 3 games doing very well. And like I said, Danny De Silva, oh man, can we just get like one great breakout season of Danny De Silva? Like, he's such a fun, exciting, talented player who it just feels like, I don't know if there's an issue with his work ethic or anything like that, but it just feels like there's so much potential there. But I don't know. Josh, why do you think it hasn't quite worked out for De Silva so far?
I think you can have all the ability in the world, but if you're not in an environment that's conducive to getting the best out of you, and a team that plays on the front foot and can get you the ball early and often, it doesn't always work out for creative players. And the other part of it is, I think you've got to have a bit of ticket to succeed in professional football. And sometimes I don't think his work ethic has really impressed coaches. We talk about Australian football and only going after kind of a good big one is better than a good little one. A lot of the time is the philosophy, and I don't like that. But at the same time, you've got to work hard. I think it's well set up for he and Davila to succeed as long as they're given the license to do what they want with the ball when they get it. Because we've seen a lot of possession from Milicic teams and not a lot of dribbling, and you got to let Danny De Silva dribble to get the best out of him. But who would have thought a team playing Moody Najjar, a striker, ostensibly, at least in his younger days, at left wing back, and Craig Noon as an inverted right wing back would work. I mean, the square pegs round holes joke that I put out on Twitter still holds, but maybe it's a master stroke from Ante Milicic to finally find a role for Moody Najjar in pro football.
We're going to bring in Joey Lynch live from Amy Park, looking very nice in a blazer there.
Here he is.
Look at that, live from the scenes. If my computer was working properly, I would show you full screen and show that you're at the wonderful venue there. But Joey, just before we get to the victory game, I wanted to bring you in on a more general topic that came up with this MacArthur game. Only 3,000 people attended, and there was the talk of ticket prices. $40 for an adult in the away bay. This, of course, is the game that had to be moved from their original stadium, Campbelltown Stadium, to Penrith because the pitch was, I don't know, worse than anyone's backyard. And junior tickets were $36. Look, that's just way too much. Am I the only one who thinks like that is absolutely insane? Like, you have 3,000 people there. Like, you should be essentially be giving these tickets away almost. Maybe you don't want to give them away, but to me, it is crazy how much this game cost. And I don't think I would have gone if I had to pay that amount of money. And I definitely couldn't have convinced any friends or family to go for those prices. Teo, your thoughts?
All I'll say, I won't preempt Joey and Josh's point, but what I will add to the discussion is I only found out the Big Bash cricket was starting tonight about an hour ago after the game had already started. The crowd was terrible. SCG looked really sparse. There's a referendum going on post-COVID sport and summer sport. And I think that the A-League is being caught up very much so in that. But Joey, welcome. You and Josh can go to town.
Yeah, you first, Joey, or shall I?
Well, all right, I'll go first. Basically, you talked there something about, Nick, about giving away tickets. If you are MacArthur, if you are Western United, in fact, if you are any A-League men's club or any A-League women's club, in fact, at this time of year, maybe not all of them, but absolutely there should be options that any child under 12 should not have to pay for your games in some regard. If they are a local junior, they should not have to pay for your games, as I remove my sunglasses that are interfering with the microphone.
Your Eric Bombart's sunglasses, I might add.
Yeah, yes, my error. I was wearing contacts earlier today. These are the only non-prescription sunglasses that I actually own. The free ones I got from Melbourne City. But yeah, there is zero shame in allowing young kids to go to your game for free. In fact, it is something you should absolutely be doing. If you must convince the money men that it is something you can do, call it a loss leader. Dress it up in that, saying that you are getting fans in that will become members and keep coming for 10, 15, 20 years. There should be adult tickets in this league, which affect, like, the worst seats at every A-League game, an adult should be able to get them for $20. I mean, what's the campaign in Britain? I mean,
20 is plenty.
20 is plenty? Yeah, absolutely. All right, maybe take into account inflation a little bit or something like that. But at the same time, British clubs aren't hurting for fans like A-League clubs. So maybe 20 is plenty here in Australia as well. I mean, the entire supposed point of difference between football and other sports, well, one of them is that live crowd, that live atmosphere, that raucous atmosphere that comes with thousands of people getting out there. There is nothing worse than watching a football match in a quiet stadium. Absolutely, every A-League men's club, every A-League women's club, not just MacArthur, not just Western United, all of them should be giving away free tickets to local juniors, reducing ticket prices, doing every single thing they can to get people through the door.
In 2019, we at FNR ran a whole bunch of expansion specials and got everyone from all the bids on to spruik their bids. And I distinctly remember Gino Mara coming on FNR and telling us about this amazing peppercorn rent deal they had at Campbelltown Stadium with the council, and promising that those savings would be passed on to their burgeoning new supporter base. That's what they said. And they've proceeded to price gouge their own active fans, put not one but two groups, the original active group and the splinter group, who was originally on the club side, but they've now put those supporters offside as well. They've price gouged away fans. They've done a whole bunch of amateurish things on social media, such as their kit launch, where they gave Danny De Silva a shirt that was 4 sizes too big and tried to disguise it by tucking it in the wind. You know, everything about MacArthur screams bad decisions and amateurism. And I'm sorry, but Western United gets so much flack being the expansion club. Where's the stadium? Where's the stadium? Where's the stadium? And rightly so. But where's the criticism for MacArthur here? Is it just because nobody cares? Because honestly, they've added nothing to this league. They have added absolutely nothing off the park, apart from a really annoying, gimmicky sound effect. And I really think, Canberra or Wollongong would have done more in their place.
To be fair, the memes around their logo design and who designed it were worth the entry fee alone. If that cost $12 million, then sign me up, baby. That was that continues to tickle me to this day.
Look, here's what I think. I don't like to raise a problem, which I obviously just did, without raising a solution. I think it's very important that we don't just come on here and complain. This is the program that is going to solve Australian football. That's what I'm promising you today. So here is my way. Joey had a good thing of just making a hard
space. For those of you listening on the podcast, go and watch the Twitter video at 28 minutes 30.
All right, look, here is my solution. Joey had a good solution. Look, we might just have a flat fee of $20 for an adult. I have a better solution. I think we should decide what the price is based on how the team played the week previous, right? So, for example, if you played an amazing game, like the Jets right now, the Jets are box office, you can put your prices slightly up. We'll start everyone at a flat 20, and it'll be like a stock market, right? So Jets right now, 3 great games in a row, they're at $23. All right. Wanderers, let's be honest, 3 bad games in a row. They're at 17. This is how it's going to be throughout the season, and that was how the prices will be set. What do we think about this solution? Am I a genius?
This sounds a lot like Perth Glory cryptocurrency to me.
You're about to talk about the utility for the token.
You guys are talking over each other because you love it so much.
Because Nick, they literally had the same response. Both of them immediately thought of our gentleman friend from the UK in the back of a taxi trying to buy Perth Glory.
Yeah,
Jim
that's
Harwood.
right. Lock, stock, and two smoking barrels. The deleted scenes. All right, Joey. Let's talk about what happened at Amy Park today because you were there. It was a very interesting game, I thought, but conditioned by the red card. Would you say?
Conditioned by the red card, conditioned by the early injury to BJ Hamill being forced off, I think, opening 10, 15 minutes. Victory at that point, they're down to Jason Guerrier and Lee Broxham as their centre-back pairing, arguably their fourth and fifth choice centre-backs for this season. They're down a man. Basically, in his post-game press conference after this one, Tony Popovich said that everything that could go wrong did go wrong for them. I mean, even their consolation penalty that would have made it 3-1 at the end was rightfully ruled out. I'm not sure why it was given in the first place. Live and watching the replays, I was even more confused. But I think this was a result that was inevitably going to come. Melbourne Victory were eventually going. Well, as I saw actually after the game, the good vibes are still going. The Victory fans, in a stark contrast to last year, stuck around and were doing chants with the Victory players about Melbourne Boys still being number one after a 3-0 defeat. I think that speaks to the change in vibes surrounding the club. But a defeat was eventually going to come, and now it is simply a matter of seeing how they are able to respond. You would think ostensibly Economides, Miranda would come back in next week against Adelaide United. Sporanovic was on the bench for this one. He started midweek in the FFA Cup. Popovich was very evasive about whether he would potentially be able to start next week, but you'd have to think that is coming sooner rather than later. So the big test, I think, will come for this unit when we see how they respond to this. I will say one thing. I would like to see Robbie Cruz starting next week for Melbourne Victory. I think he just adds a dynamic to the attack. Yes, I know Victory fans frustrated with him last season. Robbie Cruz is the type of player that doesn't always jump off the screen on first glance as doing great things when he's on the pitch, but I really think that when Victory get Economides back, they're getting a full squad back. He really brings another dimension to the attack that should be used more often.
Joey, what was the press box consensus on the Marchand red, both immediately as it happened live and then as it got deliberated over with VAR?
Oh, as the lights here at Amy Park go off, it was a Kevin Nash big boot. It was a straight red, as I break the no wrestling references rule. It was a red card. Tony Popovich didn't agree in his post-game press conferences, complaining about how long it took for referee Kurt Adams to check the VAR and subsequently upgrade the challenge to a red card. But I didn't have a problem with it. When you raise your boot like that, when you collect another player's head with your studs, you can have absolutely no excuses. It was a red card, in my opinion, every day of the week and twice on Sundays.
Teo, Ivan Stragan on Twitter asks us, so Rojas gets his head taken off with a high boot and the player gets a yellow. Marchand puts up a high boot, gets a yellow, then gets upgraded to a red. Where is the consistency? Now, obviously, he's referring to last season, I believe, Rojas against the Wanderers up here in Sydney, which I think was a yellow card. What did you make of it?
Listen, I'm just going to just jump in one quickly. Getting it wrong in the past isn't an excuse to get it wrong again in the future. The one on Rojas was wrong. Doesn't mean that this one should have just been ignored for some sort of karmic retribution. That's not how football works.
And all I'll do is refer back to my comments off the top about how it was big teams, the big teams and the big fan bases that were the angriest about the refereeing decisions this weekend. So Ivan's prolific on Twitter. He's got a great memory and good knowledge of what's going on in football because he's such an avid consumer of all the media going on. But I think, Joey, you've answered the question better than I could.
Josh, I want to ask, Anthony Burke-Gilroy, he scored a cracker with his left. He set up a beauty with his right. Should Arnie cap him?
Oh
dear.
Are we talking about that?
We'll get there.
What did you think of the long range strike? Because
this is it.
Off air, you raised some qualms about the technique
Look, I mean, look, I'm going to sound like an idiot, which I admit. Previously, I've sounded like an idiot and not admitted it, so I'm progressing. But my point with
That's
this,
growth.
yeah, exactly, that's great. My point of this is, look, the goal is amazing. I'm not saying the goal isn't amazing that he scores, right? But that beautiful angle right behind him. Well done to Paramount Plus for A, employing Teo, but B, for getting that beautiful angle for that goal. It was really, really nice. But to me, if you just watch the goal in slow motion, and please, people out there, correct me if I'm wrong, there's just something about the way he strikes the ball, which feels very much like a right-footed player, kind of just having a swing with his left. And look, the end product was absolutely perfect. But there was just something about it that I looked at and was like, the technique seems off, and I don't know why that even bothers me. A good goal is a good goal, and we should just enjoy it. But what I will say is that cross he did with his right foot later on for the second goal, that was perfect. That was absolutely perfect. But, a really good game for him. And he was having an early battle with Jason Davidson over on the sideline. And you thought, this young player up against the experienced Jason Davidson, how's that going to go? But he really grew into the game. And, it's exciting for Perth fans. Joey, what did you think of being there in the stadium?
I had no idea where this Anthony Burke-Gilroy came from, having called him Altona Magic during the 2021 NPL Victoria season, an Altona Magic that haven't actually won an NPL game since 2019, but have been able to survive because of 2 COVID cancellations. I had no idea he had this in him. I was genuinely surprised at the level of his performance. I asked Richard Garcia about him in the post-game press conference, and he was raving about him, about how he is a great player. So, but looking at Burke Gilroy's resume, at 24, I think he's been in about 9 or 10 different clubs all around the world already. So he's certainly a journeyman. Maybe it can be said that maybe he thrives in the chaos that is Perth Glory at the moment with their troubles. Whatever it was, if he can bottle whatever happened today, could be a handy player.
How about Seattle Sounders' second team as a breeding ground for Aussie talent? First, Jesse Daly breakthrough at Brisbane Roar.
TJ Vlanich, thank you very much.
There you go. I mean, I think we're bearing the lead here because that team's called, that's their actual name, the Seattle Sounders' second team is Tacoma Defiance, which, I mean...
I think that was I can tell you now, Josh.
I think that was a wrestler in the 90s.
Altona Magic have shown some Tacoma defiance in order to stave off relegation for 3 consecutive years without winning a game.
Come on, Seattle!
Oh, God.
So Nick, to go back to your original point, are you saying that Graham Arnold should be calling up national team players directly out of the NPL? Because that's what I've taken out of your original premise about Anthony Burke-Gilroy here.
That depends.
Calm down, Mike.
That depends on, do I have a personal relationship with them? And if I do, then yes, absolutely. Otherwise, probably not. Or do I represent them? Am I their agent? But look, great game for him. Joey, give us the Sturridge update. Look, he's come to Perth. He's demanded a haircut. He's played 5 minutes. He's gone to Melbourne, worn a do-rag, sat in the stands. When will we see this guy play, if ever?
I regret to inform Australian football that it will have to wait to be saved until at least the Brisbane Roar game for Perth Glory. Richard Garcia has indicated that the plan is for Sturridge to get some minutes against the Brisbane Roar. So apologies to Melbourne City fans, or perhaps more accurately, apologies to Melbourne City's marketing team. It does not appear as though Daniel Sturridge will be playing against Melbourne City on Wednesday night, which Sirius had on is absolutely not a surprise. This is a Perth Glory side that is already missing a host of players. Sturridge is gone. Brad Jones has torn his calf, but has also not torn his calf. Richard Garcia gave a very confusing answer on that when I put him on the spot around that in his press conference. Andy Keogh is still rehabbing. Brandon O'Neill is still in Perth, waiting for his the birth of his child. So they've got a very young squad that is already depleted, and now they've got to play 3 games in the course of 7 days. I'm absolutely not surprised at all that he is not going to be playing on Wednesday. I don't think he'll play much against Brisbane. I imagine that pretty much the goal is, rightly or wrongly, for him to be somewhat approaching an ability to play 45 minutes by the time Perth get back home around round 10. But quickly before Josh jumps in, I also wanted to raise the question, Ivan Kalava, he's clearly a fan favourite of Victory already. They're already chanting for him. Are we sure he's any good?
He's a good bloke.
He's a good bloke.
It's fun.
Which,
He loves running the length of the field.
Which in Australian football is half the battle. I'll give you that.
Well, okay. Do you think he made a mistake today for any of the goals?
I thought he could have done better.
Where were his arms on the Fornaroli goal? I mean, It seems as though he dived around.
He sort of limboed the ball.
Look,
I've got a comment about Sturridge before we move on. I think we saw the warning signs for this with Jurgen Klopp, who said something in a press conference about sometimes Daniel needs to learn the difference between being hurt and being injured. The difference between pains and niggles versus when you really can't play. And he's very cautious. I mean, speaking about caution being the word of the round, Daniel Sturridge, he wraps himself in cotton wool because of his injury history. But I think he's missed a lot of games because he was afraid of worsening an existing problem. So I'm not surprised that he hasn't seen much football at all over the first several rounds of the season, and we may not see him for a few rounds more.
So instead of being a Sturridge denier, you're Sturridge hesitant, is what you're saying.
I think people should just do their own research on Daniel Sturridge, I mean, Jurgen Klopp, he's got the answers. Don't listen to the medical team.
Look, we need to move on.
I don't like where this is going.
Before we do, we need to congratulate Perth Glory because they became the first team since Melbourne City in the very first game of the season to win a game and have more possession. It's the second time it's happened in the A-League.
We already talked about this in the box. Doesn't count because Victory were down to 10 men.
Look, so far they're the only two teams to do it. All right, so
doesn't count unless it's against 11 men.
All right. Because we're going to get onto this topic in a minute, and maybe we should with Melbourne City versus Western United, which I think you were at as well. Both of you, Joey and Josh, were you both there?
Yep.
Yes. All right. That's the commitment to the cause. I have seen the highlights, so you'll have to eliminate me. But basically, it looks like Melbourne City had the majority of possession, and Western United went on to win 1-0. Joey, was that your read on the game? What happened?
Western United, basically, they pinched a 1-goal lead through a very nice-looking strike from Dylan Wenzel-Halls, and then they sat back and they were content for Melbourne City to just get down the channels and whip crosses in that they could clear away or work the ball to pockets of space outside of the area that Western were quite content to leave open for City to wander into and then promptly put a shot over the bar or have one that was blocked from range. By the end, Western weren't, I would say, 1,000% comfortable. I don't think they are yet, despite their strong defensive performances this season. I would not go around calling them a defensive juggernaut yet, but it was a lot more comfortable, a 1-0 smash and grab win than it could have been. City, an alarming lack of creativity going forward. I think the move to take Florent Bernier off was a mistake. His movement with and without the ball and his attempts to get things going were dragging Western United players out of position, and they were asking a few questions and potentially providing another avenue to goal. And basically, when he went off, City became even more one-dimensional. And, quite frankly, it's another game, another occasion in which this vaunted front three of Leckie, Naboot and McLaren has yet to blow, to quote the Italian job, anybody's bloody doors off.
I wonder how City fans are feeling about their star-studded front line after that game. And I wonder how City fans are feeling about watching Andrew Naboot run down blind alleys and try and replicate, the outside of the foot maneuver several times. And, Aidan O'Neill had a few shots from range, but that was only because Western United were allowing him to. They had 2 banks of 4, and he's the last midfielder, so it's only natural that he should be open for those opportunities. I agree with Joey on the Berenguer sub. I thought that looked like a pre-planned change based on rotating Berenguer based on his age and getting Tilio some minutes in the middle of the park. I don't hate Tilio playing as a 10, but the game state in that situation with City already down 1-0 and Western United content to set up shop on the edge of their own area, Berenguer and Tilio in tandem surely was the manoeuvre. And I think Kisnorbo showed himself to be quite inflexible with that substitution. But McLaren, a lot of red flags for me. Completely anonymous, not involved at the build-up play, not presenting for the ball, just waiting on the sort of shoulder of the last defender or waiting on the back post for the cross to come in. And so they've got no one to play off. I thought Leckie was okay. The best performing of the 3, certainly, and very active. But, this front 3 built for speed, not built for the possession game of Patrick Isnorbo. And I'm not sure how long they can wait to substitute one of them for Marco Tilio, because that will surely cause some political problems changing one of their Socceroos.
I just wanted to say one quick thing, and I swear I didn't talk about Calava with this in mind, but checking the Instagram, in attendance today for the Melbourne Victory Perth Glory, a certain Lawrence Thomas in the stands.
Ooh. Are we thinking return, or is it just a season break?
No, I'm stirring the pot. I think he's doing far too well in Europe to consider coming back to the A-League. He's in the Socceroos. In fact, I'd like to see him, Matty Ryan's the incumbent number 1, but I'd like to see him vaulted into the number 2 job for the Socceroos sooner rather than later.
Do you think Lawrence had PTSD flashbacks when Aspro got the high foot in the head from Rai Marchand? I think that would have been like a Vietnam moment for Lawrence Thomas based on what happened to him in the grand final.
So I want to ask about Western. Joey, you were in the press conference. Did John Aloisi attribute the national curriculum as to why he started Dylan Wenzel-Halls up top?
From memory, and you can correct me here, Josh, I think Prijovic just a bit unfit, wasn't 100% up for it. Now, that was the reasoning given by Aloisi. Mayhaps the actual reasoning was that he and Diamanti applied all the pressure of an Easter Island statue in their game against Perth Glory, and it was decided in a situation wherein you are not going to have much of the ball, you need to be able to hit sides in transition. It is better to start the bloke that can break out in something quicker than a jog when you need to pinch a goal. But yeah, I think what was interesting was we had a bit of a national curriculum team up on Aloisi in the press conference afterwards. Myself and Ante Jukic, well, Ante taking the lead, asking John Aloisi about teams winning when they don't have possession. John Aloisi responding basically getting down to it's not what you, it's about what you do when you do have the ball rather than how much of the ball. At which point I follow up the question, which I'm going to paraphrase. Does that not infer, John, that when the dynamics are that an A-League side has more of the ball, they simply don't know what to do with it, by your logic? And I got a very quick brush off and move on sort of answer from him.
Well, there you go. I just want to confirm that the Danish Superliga, where Lawrence Thomas plays, is on break. They return the 21st of February. Obviously, can't really play in winter in Denmark. And his team, for some reason, finishes with a capital E. I don't really know Danish grammar, but why they finish with a capital, sure. No worries. Look, Joey.
I'll tell you what, Lawrence Thomas come on the National Curriculum Challenge.
Yeah, while you're out here. Look, let's talk A-League women. Liberty A-League? Well, I don't know how we talk about it anymore. But basically, used to be known as the W League, now known as A-League women. Tay, you called 2 of these games, but, Joey, you were at one of these games. Massive. We at the victory game. Massive win for them, 5-1.
I actually rocked up late to the victory game, but I was watching it with one eye, as much as I could of it during the Perth Glory game. And from what I can tell, I've written a piece for The Guardian, basically, that should come out tomorrow, saying that basically at this point, I think Melbourne Victory's women are the best team in Melbourne. Of course,
One team in Melbourne.
Yeah, it is relative in the sense, but when you look at their positions in the league, the health of the direction of their programs, I would say with Melbourne City's men struggles in the opening weeks of the season, Melbourne Victory women are the best team in Melbourne. They've come out today. They've put Adelaide United to the sword. They're clearly going in the right direction. They are looking and investing and growing that program's pathway. As I've said in my Guardian piece tomorrow, John Didolitz's big move for them is they are going to be bringing about he wants to bring about a full 52-week program by next year if he gets his way. The big issue I see for them moving forward is Kayla Morrison has potentially done an ACL, which is going to be huge. It's incredibly disappointing for her because, as we've been saying on this show, if she had Australian eligibility, she would already be in the Matildas. She has had interest in, and the NWSL has had interest in her during this off season, during these past few months. So that would be, I mean, fingers and toes crossed that it isn't an ACL, that it is just a knock. Jeff Hopkins was trying to put a brave face on it post game, but that could be a huge loss. But I think Victory has the depth to cover her. They've still got Lynn Williams and Melina Reyes to come into this side. I think their prognosis that they are champions, that they look almost nailed on to become champions again. The pathways coming through, I think they're the strongest team in Melbourne at the moment.
So we have A-League games to talk about. So I'm A-League men's, I should say. So I'm only going to make a brief point. Joey, I actually disagree. I think Victory got worse as the game went on. And the loss of Morrison could potentially determine the direction of the title this season. I think the scans and the potential medical report here could decide the competition. Yes, Victory have good depth, but I think they had an absence of leadership out there when Morrison was not on the field. And Adelaide were creating plenty. They got blown away and they looked like a potential wooden spoon team today, but they still created a lot of chances, and Victory were heavily reliant on Casey Dumont not to concede more than the one goal that they did. I don't know if there was an outstanding team this weekend. Sydney FC, without their imports, looked fine. I think the rest of the teams, it's kind of a wait and see, particularly Melbourne and Canberra, who played a cagey game with Melbourne City getting the 1-0 win. Don't think we can read too much into Brisbane collapsing against Perth, other than those two teams may not be as close to the top four as we first thought. But I suspect that today could be a real turning point for Victory, because Kayla Morrison is referred to as mum by most of those Victory youth players, and her on-field presence is as valuable as anyone's in the competition. So I think the season was blown wide open today, and will be even more so when the medical reports come back. And if it does confirm Kayla Morrison's out for the season, then congratulations on our group stage exit from the 2023 Women's World Cup.
I will say a couple of things. Jeff Hopkins would agree with you that they didn't actually play that well. You wouldn't have thought he'd just won 5-1 in post-game. He basically knowing Jeff and knowing that he's a very reserved man, he basically inferred that they sort of played like crap and still won 5-1. He did also say that they are looking to bring in a couple of signings. So if the worst comes to worse for Kayla Morrison, I would not put it past Melbourne Victory to quickly turn to the market and bring in another centre-back as soon as possible on that front. And I know we've got men's as well, so I'll just say one final thing. Friday night, I've written another piece on this as well. It should be out midweek, but Rebecca Stott's comeback to do what she's done, I don't have enough time to talk about just how incredible this is. I can't properly articulate unless you've actually been through what she has been through, the chemotherapy and all of that. It's impossible to properly articulate what she has been through. As I've written in my piece, watching her out there reminded me of what I did on my initial diagnosis with lymphoma in 2008. I did two things when I finally got access to the internet. First thing I Googled was mortality rates for lymphoma, as you do. Second thing I Googled was athletes that have had lymphoma. I wanted to find an athlete that had had lymphoma and had come back and hadn't been destroyed by the treatment and the disease. I found John Lester and Mario Lemieux, and now a whole new generation is going to find Rebecca Stott, and I just think that's amazing.
What a beautiful way to end your contribution to TNC. And we have to say goodbye to you because you are at Amy Park and you need to get home. And can I make a very stupid point after your very beautiful point that you made there?
Yeah.
As is my way as host. You can host it next week and do it in your very professional way, but I have taken control for today. So behind you, I'm seeing seagulls just fly around. And this is a constant thing at Amy Park. Seagulls everywhere, right? And, people complain and, oh, there's too many seagulls. Look, I was watching Benfica the other day, right? And Benfica has an eagle in its stadium that is its mascot. They have owned, it's this kind of majestic bird that they pre-match flies around the ground and everyone cheers and, oh, what a spectacle it is. Why doesn't one of the Melbourne teams make their mascot the seagull? They be the Melbourne Victory Seagulls, the Melbourne City Seagulls. Then it seems like it's part of the show. Then it seems like, wow, these guys are really committed to it. People love it. People embrace it. It can be, there's so many seagulls there. Yep, we're really putting the pressure on them. I'm saying we turn a bad thing into a good thing. I didn't say, I said before that I didn't want to raise any problems without raising solutions. There we go. There's an option for both Melbourne City and Melbourne Victory. What do we think?
Man, your Bitcoin ticket price system's looking real good compared to that idea, Nick.
Nick, I will have to say that I appreciate your appreciation for majestic birds. However, I don't think it would work here in Melbourne. I think they tried something similar at the MCG without much success.
Well, look, the offer is there for Melbourne City or Melbourne Victory or any expansion teams that come through and want to claim the seagull.
North Sunshine Eagles. Maybe they can get in through Pro Realm.
Joey, thanks very mumuch for joining us. Joey will be back next week. You can catch him in ESPN, in The Guardian. I don't know, everyone he's writing for. Follow him on Twitter.
Well. I'll be doing AOT next week.
There you go. All right. See, someone employ him full time because this is getting ridiculous to plug all this stuff. But Joey, thanks so much for joining us. Get home safe. Good luck.
Have a good show, guys.
Thanks, Joey. Beautifully said as well, Joey. Very nice.
Yeah. I think if that's anything to go by, definitely read his Stoddy piece.
Absolutely. And definitely read my seagull piece that also will be appearing, hopefully, when I pitch it to one of the many organizations.
Look, can we go from seagulls to penguins and talk about the 0-0 draw between Brisbane Roar and Adelaide United?
Speaking of majestic birds.
Speaking of bird shit, how much do we actually want to say about this game? All right, because I really want to move on.
I'm telling you, this was actually a really entertaining. It's the stereotypical entertaining for a 0-0 draw. 0-0 draw. Brisbane Roar had the absolute measure of this game for 80 minutes. Ivanovic had his own personal XG going and just couldn't score, which was quite frustrating. Really through maybe his lack of finishing skill as opposed to brilliant goalkeeping, though. So, again, young developing player, one that this podcast is a big advocate for. I suggested last week that Milosnic wasn't having a good season, left the game after 55 minutes in this one and wasn't really prominent in an attacking sense. And then Ivanovic was subbed out for Jez Lofthouse, who got 20 minutes on his A-League men's debut to show us what he could do. But credit to Adelaide. Last 10 minutes, our man Ben Halloran took over. Kasingi Yengi then had a great chance to win it for them. And then Harvey Lopez got a really dumb red card at the end of the game, which will wipe him out with suspension. And just from a Paramount Plus point of view, I feel for Campbell Johnson, who got to do his first A-League game, and he got a 0-0 draw. The word is that he and Scott McDonald were a very popular combination up there in Brisbane. So well done to both of them. And really, this game deserved. It could have quite easily been, 2-1, 2-2. Roar will feel as though a win's coming, but this was 3 points there for the taking for the majority of this game, and they didn't take it.
I have a question for you, Josh. Why doesn't Mohamed Toure start more for Adelaide? Because he came on in the 82nd minute. He created an opportunity late on. Why don't you think he's getting more game time?
Very good question. And I think it is just competition for places up front. Ryan Kiddo's starting at the moment on the left-hand side ahead of Craig Goodwin. Craig Goodwin is a star in the A-League. Craig Goodwin has decided FFA Cup finals on his own.
That's an odd one.
Yeah, so, I mean, Kiddo, I think, is better as a left back, but that position's taken up quite convincingly by Josh Cavallo at the moment. So, look, I probably wouldn't start Kiddo next week. He works really, really hard. So that's, I think the defensive work rate is important to Calvart. But I would like to see Toure get more minutes. Is he a starting player? I don't think he is in this side, just based on how important Halloran is, how well Yengi's playing, and the ongoing duel for that spot between Goodwin and Kiddo. But I would like to see him introduced on the hour mark as opposed to in the last 10 minutes, because that run that he made down the touchline to beat, was it Milinaric or Corey Brown? I'm not sure, but to cut that ball back was absolutely phenomenal, and just it gets people out of their seats.
Teo, I have a question about Adelaide. They are undefeated, and yet they have not won a game. 3 draws in 3 games. What is your read on them so far? Is this a team that, just with a slight amount of adjustments or a bit more luck is going to go on to go have a great winning run, or are they lucky to be getting these draws? What is your rating on them so far?
Oh, no, I think, look, they were definitely lucky against Melbourne City, and I think they were the second best team for a lot of this game. But I see them as just a bit of a middle market team. They are a side that's developing players and is going to be losing them, whether it's to overseas or to other A-League teams. They are performing a function for the game in this country, which is incredibly valuable in that their academy regularly gets rated primarily by Melbourne City to take their players to other parts of the country. And we know that South Australia as a state is rated by Victoria at NPL level on a regular basis for their talents as well. Adelaide's an important cog in the wheel of what's going on in the game in Australia. It's just not manifesting itself in its team actually winning games in the A-League right now. I think they're a middle market team. I think the better teams will beat them. I think teams that either on a bad run or aren't on their game will lose to them. I can see them being in the top 6 and not winning the title, but I can definitely see them in the top 6.
Yeah, then look, they're not, for a team that I think actually has quite a bit of kind of attacking talent, like you say, Josh. Craig Goodwin's on the bench there. They're not creating a hell of a lot. They're ranked 9th out of 12 for expected goals. Just not sure how they're going to be. I mean, but of course, they're ranked 9th as well for expected goals conceded. So I don't know. I think maybe you're right. Maybe they're just going to be the middle team. I actually thought they might do quite well this season, but yeah, who knows? We'll see. We'll see how they go.
I think the forward line is a bit of a red herring when you try and solve that conundrum, because it's the midfield that isn't quite working for Adelaide at the moment. Isaias is a sentimental favourite, but I still maintain he is a poor signing. He should not have been brought back, and he should certainly not be starting. I just don't think he's at the level he used to be. And he does a lot of suffocating of the centre backs and very conservative positioning and recycling the ball, and not a lot of progressing the ball. They've got a lot of number 6s. They don't have a lot of creators in the middle of the park. Stefan Mork for me is a runner, is a third man runner who arrives in the box. He's not a creator. Louis Dorigo is a number 6. Joe Coletti is a number 6. They have One Day as well, who wasn't in the match day squad. Not a lot of creative midfielders in this team and a lot of forwards. It's a bit of an imbalanced squad, not in terms of the amount of players they have for relative positions, but in terms of the variety of players and attributes.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. Look, I think we've talked enough about a nil or draw. Let's talk. This podcast started out as we want to look at all of Australian football. We want to discuss the big issues. But let's be honest, we are now just a Jets fans podcast, all right? We just love the Jets, all right? They haven't won a game, and I don't care.
It's all about the Jets, baby. Yeah, the Jets.
Yeah, it's all about the Jets. We love the Jets, all right? So, look, 2-2, 3 weeks in a row, they have been the game of the round. They had the 2-1 loss, the F3 derby in week 1. That's 2-2 with Wanderers, and now the 2-2 with Sydney. And, that's a pretty tough run in terms of, you think about, you got to play your local rivals and then the 2 big Sydney teams. But thoughts on the Jets so far? Teo?
Fantastic comeback. I was scratching my head as to how they got into this hole. A poor piece of individual defending by Matt Yerman, who has covered himself in glory. And I know that there were a few people asking, why would you let Topo Stanley leave and replace him with Yerman? And perhaps that is the fly in the ointment, and one of the reasons why Newcastle only have 2 points from their first 3 games so far. He's got a great reputation. He's high on the NRI, but he hasn't actually played well in some of the key moments. And then the comeback was just sensational. And yes, it was driven by Valentino Yule, or Tino Yule, as we seem to be getting now. I didn't know that was a thing when he was playing in NPL Victoria. But what a great comeback from Newcastle. They really took the game on. Arthur Pappas was going hell for leather at the end. They were not perturbed by the disallowed goal for the contentious offside, which I'm sure, Nick, you will speak to in more detail. But this game ended, and the commentators didn't want it to end. The crowd didn't want it to end. The players certainly didn't, and Arthur Pappas didn't, because Newcastle were trying to overrun a Sydney FC team that were counterpunching as best they could. And if we get 1 to 2 A-League games a week like this, especially if it's the one that's on free-to-air, this competition is going to organically get the growth it's looking for, because this is proper entertaining stuff.
Josh, I believe you didn't see the match, but have you seen the highlighted list?
So I had it open on my laptop as I was in the press box for the Melbourne City Western United game. As that game dragged on and became more and more predictable and dull, I started glancing more and more down at the screen in front of me rather than the real match happening outside those glass windows. Look, I think Valentino Yule is a great success story for players making the jump up to professional football. And it's because he was given a second chance. Because Western United couldn't find a place for him in their setup because they didn't play with traditional wingers. And, you know, he obviously had to step up to the level athletically. But, I mean, he was always too good for NPL Victoria. He only played about 7 or 8 games before John Anastasiadis decided to wrap him up in cotton wool and take him with him on his A-League coaching journey. I just love the guy. I think he's a great character. I think he's an exhilarating talent when he gets going and starts beating players. And at this level of confidence, there aren't many more exciting wingers in the league. That dribble where he left Ryan Grant on the floor. I mean, talk about, you know, Jerome Boatenging a defender and then smashing it near post was just perfection.
It was 2 really beautiful goals, 2 really good finishes, great touches, 2 good assists from Pena as well. I thought another great game from Angus Thurgate, who I have been, a bit harsh with in terms of the amount of hair he has on his head. But that dude is such a good player. All right,
why do we keep bringing it up?
3 weeks in a row.
It's
killing him.
It's the first way. It's the first thing I noticed, but the second thing I noticed is, God damn, this guy's a good player. I think, look, the Jets are so much fun. Like, credit to the coaching staff there to getting them, that quickly up to playing that level of football. Like you say, Teo, credit to them for going 2-0 down and not, that can be, with a team that I think's, in a transitional season, in progressing, really kind of playing in a way that maybe puts you. If Sydney's 2-0 up and the Jets have to attack, and I don't think the Jets' defense, I think that's their real kind of Achilles heel, if you will. I think that kind of plays into City's hands. So that could have gotten quite ugly, but they did so well to get back into it. Just on that, Josh, Ryan Grant came into a bit of criticism during the game. It's kind of, for so long, he's been kind of one of the dominant right backs in the A-League. And I saw a few Sydney FC fans kind of saying on Twitter, it's not Ryan Grant of old. He doesn't have that lung bursting kind of runs up and down the pitch. Teo, he's in the Socceroos setup now as well. What do you make of Ryan Grant so far this season?
Well, I'm going to apply the standard that I did for the 2 games I commentated with Georgie Omandale at the weekend. If you're in the national team, we are marking you harsh. You don't get to come back to the A-League women's or the A-League men's and use it for game time and match conditioning. You come back here to be a top player and to separate and show yourself to be above the standard of your opponent. How exciting that he was tested and beaten. It's a really good sign because it's going to force him to go back and work to get better. And I hardly think his place in the Socceroos team is in jeopardy. But if this happens on a more regular basis, if we see more players able to blaze past him like Valentino Yule did, then I think it's great that there are now enough people scrutinising this to ask questions about it.
Samson, that's all I can say. As soon as he cut off the mullet. His performances have dipped sharply. And, I think Daniel Sturridge has taken note of that and said, haircuts are pretty important to get right. So, Ryan Grant, the magic is gone. # Team Karacic.
Look, from
Now-
Sydney FC's perspective, I just want to quickly say, nice to see Elvis Campsova get a goal. It's a bit of a tap in, and it was good work from Adam Lafondra to set him up. But great to see the backflip happening as well. He does seem like a player who really needs a lot of confidence. I thought Max Burgess played really well, and I think he's a great partner for Ninkovic. But I'm extremely biased on that, so we'll just move right on from that. But Sydney FC look struggling early on. They haven't, I think, won a game yet. They're down the bottom of the table. They have been a top 2 team, I think, since going back to about 2016. Do we think this is the year where they kind of basically fall away from the top 2?
Well, I think, if it's top 2, then quite possibly, because you need fine margins and good luck. And that leads me into the question I was going to ask you about the Lafondra offside and the disallowed goal for 3-2. But yeah, I think on the evidence so far, their inability to break down MacArthur, giving up a 2-0 lead here, just a bit of a general discontent about the fact that from day one, this team was created to be the headline act of the A-League, and almost as though this competition can't exist without a successful Sydney FC. And this is something that I believe, was it last week or the week before that we were discussing when victory is good, the league is good? I think it was last week. I think that's kind of been the FFA Lowy era ethos, is that Sydney FC has to be good for the A-League to be good. And maybe this is a sign of a new era, quite genuinely, if they have a season of not just struggle, but even failure by their standards and by anyone's standards, to see exactly how the competition chugs along with a Sydney FC team that's not either a draw card or one of the most successful clubs.
So just on this point, we've actually never had an A-League season where Victory, Sydney, and Wanderers were all good in the same season. Not even like a top kind of all going for the top 4. I would really love to see an A-League. I think I'm not particularly biased to any team, but I would really love to see an A-League season where all 3 of those teams are having a good season, challenging for the titles. I think it'd be really interesting. But the league, I don't think, can depend on the success or the seasonal success of.
You're going to hate this year's grand final between MacArthur and Western, mate, because overreaction round 3. That's where we're heading. Josh, jump in.
I'm really looking forward to Newcastle Jets versus Brisbane Roar in this year's decider. No, I just enjoyed Adam Lafondra's contribution to the discourse on Twitter for the offside goal, and I quote. Twice you've commented, bud, to someone who said he was offside. I weren't offside. Ref told me it was from the first shot. Apparently the defender didn't play at the ball when he blocked Retre's shot. Thumbs up.
All your bases belong to us, Adam Lafondra.
So apart from the grammatical issues that Lafondra has there, I mean, I look at this and go, yeah, how is that offside? Like, does anyone here think that was offside? Am I losing my mind?
I mean, I think Adam Lafondra summed it up pretty concisely there. I have nothing more to add to his completely incomprehensible statement.
I mean, yeah, like the decision is incomprehensible in a way, because so they're saying Elsie didn't play at the ball, but he's clearly stretching to block the ball and successfully does so. Teo, can you work this one out at all?
I'm fine with respecting the referee's decision on that one, mainly because it sets up the season narrative so nicely.
Hey, as the Newcastle Jets fan podcast,
it would have taken the wind out of the Jets, and from a neutral entertainment point of view, it was the best thing for the game. And I think we remember that fantastic semi-final in 2018, and also the really great home and away game they played at the back end of that season. Sydney-Newcastle was our rivalry, our thing for the briefest amount of time. And this is the sort of thing that might rekindle the fire. And I'm all for it.
All right. Well, I agree. I think more referee decisions should be made on narrative alone. I think if you score, and also I think if you score a bicycle kick and you're like a meter offside, I don't care. It's a
barrack
bicycle
for the
kick.
story. Barrack for the story. That's always the answer.
Totally. If it's like an 18-year-old kid on his debut, fine. Let him just have one. I don't care at all. So look, no, I think it was a pretty terrible decision, but it worked out. Really looking forward to see the Jets play. Who do the Jets play next? That's what I'm really, because that's now who I want to watch. That's basically what I look for in the calendar. They play Wellington on Friday night. How do you think they're going to go there, Josh?
I think Wellington could punish their mistakes. That's why I am sitting on the fence for this one. I actually think Wellington might win this game, and the Jets will be hard done by. I'm going 2-1 to Wellington.
I think Newcastle will completely outplay Wellington and find a way to draw 2-2.
There you have it. Look, that's all the games that happened this weekend. But is there anything else in Australian football that you guys want to talk about? Where we usually take an hour and a half to discuss everything. Because there's only three of us, Ante Jukic out late fitness test, did not pass. Nick Dabano never considered for selection. He needs to go to the bench. Joey appeared briefly, cameo. But is there anything you guys want to raise before we end the show?
I just really enjoyed the Doherty Cup final broadcast today with Joey, who was looking so fly in his get up from the Amy Park press box, whereas I went home and changed into basically pajamas, essentially, and slathered aloe vera all over my sunburnt face. But it was a lot of fun and really good to see an NPL level broadcast with multicam replays, pregame and halftime shows. More ambitious undertaking, and that bodes well for the future, because I think sometimes people are turned away from those live streams because they're a little bit rough around the edges, I suppose, technically. And if we could have a sort of game of the round situation developing, I think that will help the viewership, especially in the winter months where the A-League's off.
Great to see NPL coming back. Much needed. Victoria hard hit. New South Wales had a season cancelled. Enough's enough. We need a full season. It's great to see that both clubs made the commitment to come back and play in December.
Teo, just quickly, you did commentate two A-League women's games this week. History, Wellington playing in their first game. Tell us what you made of those two games.
The first one was a very 0-0 draw. I mean, the highlights package has to go for 3 minutes, and they were digging. Wellington were 34-1 to win and 8-1 to draw pre-game. Now, you should never use gambling odds as your guide, and may as well. It's worth saying that any registered player or accredited journalist that covers the game in this country cannot actually gamble on football. Because it becomes a violation of either their rego or their accreditation. So obviously I do not. But I'm just using that as a guide as to how rank an underdog they were considered to be. It might say more about Wanderers, the fact that they did start three of their best attacking players on the bench. Maybe they took liberties. Maybe players weren't ready. But Wellington will go into this game against Newcastle next week. Instead of thinking about survival, they'll be thinking about beating them based on what I saw on Saturday in the game between Newcastle and Sydney FC, and by the same token, I think Newcastle will have to think about who they started on the bench, because I think that they were way too conservative last season with their selections. They played two holding midfielders in almost every game. I think they need to heed the lesson from Wanderers, make the most of having a week of game tape and go for it, and be ready for whatever Wellington have in store.
All right. Well, should we do our tips for next week? I think that's a good way to wrap up the show. I have no idea what we tipped last week, and so I have no idea what the leaderboard is or how we're going. But if someone wants to listen back to last week's show and tell me that I was right on all of them, that would be much appreciated. But let's start with the first game of the round. Melbourne City v Perth Glory. What are your thoughts? Teo, go first.
Well, I know I was wrong on this one because I tipped Victory to win 3-0. So I'm going to hold the line here, and I'm going to tip Melbourne City to bounce back, and I'm going to tip it by a score of 2-1.
Josh.
Yeah, I didn't think Perth Glory were all that impressive this afternoon or this evening. I just don't. I don't think this team knows what its best lineup is, and aside from a couple of good individual performances, I don't think there's a lot of cohesion there. I think they were done a massive favour by the red card. So I'm going to agree with Teo, and I'm going to say it's a 1-0 for Melbourne City.
Yeah, look, Perth today, they get the red card. They scored 2 cracking goals, one of them late in injury time, which, like we were talking about, maybe Fornaroli's could be saved. So, yeah, I'm going to tip City 2-0. Let's go on to the next game. This is the game of the round, obviously, because the Jets are involved. Newcastle Jets, Wellington Phoenix. Josh, give us your prediction. We know you just said that Wellington might pick off their mistakes.
Yeah, I think 2-1 to Wellington was my tip. Teo went 2-2. Stoll, did you give your tip?
Yes. Jets 5, Wellington 1. All right. This is the game where it just all comes together for the Jets.
This is the coming out party for Newcastle, and then all of a sudden, this podcast won't be alone in saying they're the best team in the league.
Yeah, it's just look. I don't really think they're going to win 5-1. It's just I'm really high on them, so I want them to just have some massive statement victory. Western United, beat the defending champions this week against Brisbane Roar, a bit of a TNC favourite. Josh, you were big on Brisbane Roar early. How do you think they're going to go? Aloisi returning to Brisbane, or well, not returning to Brisbane, but at least hosting them.
Yeah, I don't think these fly-in, fly-out Melbourne games have done Brisbane Roar any good. I'm still holding on to Raw Coin for now in your cryptocurrency stakes, Stoll. But I don't think they're going to win here. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw.
I'm tempted to say the Raw will get something out of the game. I think Wenzel Halls will score for the 3rd straight week, playing against his former side. And then they could bring out the "you didn't want him" gif, and it will be 1-0 to Western United.
I'm going to say 0-0, and I'm going to hate talking about it on next week's show. One of the traditional rivalries, I guess, Adelaide United v Melbourne Victory. Teo, thoughts on that one?
I suspect Adelaide at home will be very difficult for Victory away, especially after the suspension to Marchand and some of the questions that they've got over their team. I think Adelaide wins this 2-1.
Yeah, I agree. I think I said in our FNR preview style that if Marchand isn't any good, then Victory won't be good either. And he has been good, but now he's suspended. So that leaves a massive hole in the center of the park. And I don't think anyone feels it doing the same job that Marchand does. And also there's a problem up front for Victory. I'm concerned that Marjota hasn't started yet, and I don't think D'Agostino is really a first choice option for a club that's hoping to contend for the title. Adelaide could easily have picked off Brisbane away from home, and at Hindmarsh they're a different proposition. So I'm going to go for Adelaide 2, Victory 0.
Adelaide have drawn all 3 games so far, and I like the idea of them going on an incredible drawing streak. We've had winning streaks. Adelaide United had an incredible one under Guillermo Amor. We've had losing streaks. Central Coast Mariners had a few of those, as did the New Zealand Knights all the way back in the day. I want to see the draw streak. I don't know what the record is in the A-League for draws, but I want to see like 20 of them in a row. I don't really want to see them, but I at least would find that funny. I'm going to say 1-1. Adelaide Melbourne Victory. Look, almost a derby. I think I called it El Janico at one stage. Western Sydney Wanderers v Macarthur on Saturday night. Wanderers under Robinson haven't really impressed. Macarthur, top of the table. Teo, how do you think this one's going to play out?
Wanderers aren't going to be the first team to score against Macarthur in open play, and I don't think they're going to score against that defence at all. Macarthur 1, Wanderers 0.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty compelling. I think this could be a 0-0, actually. I think, Macarthur will probably set up shop. Western Sydney haven't been terrible defensively, except against Newcastle Jets, but Jets make anybody look bad because they're so electric. So 0-0 for me.
I'm going to say 1-0 Macarthur. I agree with you, Teo. And then finally, Mariners v Sydney FC. Can Sydney FC get their first win of the season, Josh?
Against the Mariners? Absolutely. Sydney with the revenge game, 3-0 to Corica's boys.
Josh stole my scoreline. Yeah, I'm actually really worried about the Mariners for this one. I will say it'll be 4-1. I think Sydney will win comfortably.
I'm going to agree. I'm going to say 3-1, just for a bit of difference. And look, I think we should end it there, unless you guys want to talk about should Christian Volpato be capped by the Socceroos. Does anyone think he should?
In Football Manager, sure. Yeah.
Does anyone think he should, based on the 1 minute that he played for Roma when they were already losing 3-0 and under an injury crisis against Inter? Now, congratulations on him for getting his debut. That's really cool. That's amazing, playing in Serie A. But does anyone think he should be in the Socceroos for that?
No, well, see, under the new rules where you can play until a certain age and even a certain number of caps, cap tying players is a thing of the past. Players will commit to you when they are ready to go to a major tournament with you and lock themselves in. It is not worth throwing friendlies at players unless you genuinely think they are somewhat close to your best possible team.
Are you going to
Josh.
throw a kid who's played barely any senior football into a do or die Asian Cup qualifier? No.
I am not, but he's
World Cup qualifier, I should say, in Asia.
I'm not, but the person who coached him at his academy would, probably because it would benefit his academy. You know, it'd be nice for him to say that he's coached the Socceroo.
We were so close to not getting sued, Nick. I mean, we got right to the end of the show.
Look, direct all your mail at anteukic@espn.com.au. Look, yeah, I don't think he should be capped. I don't think Italy are going to steal him from under our noses. I think they have a few better players that they might be looking at, especially given that they more or less have do or die World Cup qualifiers. They could be facing missing out for the second time in about 70 years or whatever. So, yeah, congratulations to him. It's really cool that he, played for Roma in what was a pretty rough game for them. But yeah, I think calls to cap him a bit early. But on that note, cap Valentino Yule. Why not? That would be fun. Josh, Teo, Joey, everyone listening, thanks so much for joining us on TNC Football. Tune in next week. And by the way, let us know during the week what you want us to talk about. Write in, subscribe, like, comment, I don't know, follow us, whatever.
Shout out to the person who made the graph of possession versus results over the last few years in the A-League. That was fantastic content.
Yeah, that was great. And we really appreciate that. And we really appreciate everyone kind of getting in touch during the week. It does genuinely mean a lot. It's really cool. This just started out as a bit of an experiment and it seems to be going well. Quite like Arthur Pappas's Jets. All right, that's enough.
At Jace Ziv, the credit for that one. Fantastic stuff.
All right, cool. Contributor of the week. We'll give him an award. It's an award in name only, much like a Socceroos cap in a friendly. Doesn't actually mean much, but good. Thanks so much. Let's see who wins it next week. Thank you so much for listening, and we will be back next week, roughly around the same time after the last A-League game, or you can tune in whenever you get your podcasts. Have a good week, guys.